So I'm Andrew. I'm currently the Chief Justice of BU Student Government, and along with Tino here, we've started this archival project with the help of the BU Center for Humanities this year.
Yeah, like Andrew said, we were graciously given this grant in order to do some archival work, and we're really excited to show off all the work we've done and all the curation we've done in a culminating event on April 30th at 11 a.m.
Absolutely. We have 6 documents here that we've chosen that sort of bring us through the timeline from 1986 to now in 2026. So if you want to talk about that first.
Yeah, so the very first document, as you see here, is the Boston University Student Union Senate Ad Hoc Committee investigating BU's investments in corporations conducting business in South Africa. Now, obviously, the cultural context here is the U.S. As well as BU had investments in apartheid South Africa. Students being very concerned about this wanted to figure out a way that they could understand greater where exactly BU was invested in, and how they could perhaps divest from those holdings, given the social implications as well as tangible financial implications of investing in government that is doing something as heinous as apartheid. So this one is particularly interesting due to the clear, sort of activist flavor of it. You can see that students were very interested in figuring out ways to position themselves within Boston University and position themselves as, having a seat on the table when it comes to making the huge sort of decision-making, being on decision-making.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that was really interesting about this is that this sort of shows the idea, the inception of the idea within student government as well. Right. This really grew to a larger scale initiative across the university and was a university-wide reckoning, I would say, in the 80s, that finally did lead to BU divesting in areas that were directly impacting apartheid. So I think that this was a valid example and a very powerful example of the student activism within student government, but also the ability that these conversations were able to be had with administration and led to tangible outcomes, which I think is a really powerful meaning for students that have the experience of being students and have the input to make decisions on how their money and their education is going to be, obviously in a way that works also for the university in a very powerful way. So I think this sort of was one of the first documents that we saw that really motivated us to do this project too. It was just on one of the folders on top of the mountain of archive materials that we have, and I think that this really motivated the both of us to dig deeper and find all the other documents we're going to show you today.
This one here is more of a document about the internal structures of student government. So this is an outline of the Minority Affairs Council. So this council doesn't exist anymore. We're not exactly sure when it was, it was dispatched from student government, but this is one of the founding documents. And essentially, what it does is it establishes a structural system for representation of religious groups, of affinity groups, where they have certain reps to student government who are all within this kind of council where they can talk about issues or certain problems that are going on within student government or within the university affecting their affinity group, as well as helping them with things like PR or things like organizing events on more of the positive side. So it's kind of interesting to see, student government taking a really active role and being the ones advocating for, as well as planning sort of these religious, these affinity group events. And as time has gone on, and something that we hope to point out in the documents is that this is actually something that has been taken, the administration has taken a much heavier hand in doing this kind of community programming for not only affinity groups, but especially in social political sort of contentious topics. And so, it's kind of interesting to see the rigid structure that existed in student government to kind of address these sort of issues, and how that type of structure has really now been developed into the administration. And so, something that we kind of want to point out to is like, hey, students had done this, students had been doing this. And so what are ways in which students can kind of get their voices back, right, into these kind of, conversations, and kind of re-implement some of the structure that worked well for students in the past in order to keep a healthy pulse and a healthy kind of, establishment of student voice and, advocating for their own issues.
I think another really important thing to think about is that there are over 450 student organizations at BU right now with so many cultural and affinity-based groups. And I think that this shows student government's direct willingness to put on programming, either in cooperation with or independently of these groups. And I think that that's also shown a shift, as Tina was just mentioning, that student government is there to support these groups now, especially with the very federated student activities, just being in a very separate area of like student life and organization in the university. So I think that this shows that student government is able to also just host these programs and that are beyond just aligning with other groups that are on campus. But I think that it also poses a lot of great opportunities to bring these groups together as well, and bring in all of these different wonderful groups that can have an impact when they're brought together. Because I think we've found about at least a half dozen other documents about the Minority Affairs Council.
That's right.
Throughout looking at these documents, and the programming is so vast and it's so important for students, and it really shows a specific point in time,
right,
through these documents. And depending on whether they were talking about, I think we have one here that's a celebration of African American voices, we have a look into Arab culture, a night of rational discourse that was about crime and safety. So not the Minority Affairs Council, but these are all different programs put on by the student union, student government,
right.
And especially the ones that I was saying are funded and run by the Minority Affairs Council. Those offer so much information and so much for students to take out of them,
right.
That I think that there's even more of an impact when students are able to put that on sometimes, and bring in cooperation with the university, bring in professors that are experts in their field, bring in lecturers, and bring in even people that are just from other universities. And there are so many connections at BU that I think that this is a great way to start and a great way to look at how students can be involved with this, and then bring our values at BU forward and bring them through student programming. We've been talking a lot about the programming that student government has put on in the past, but I think that this document does a really great job of showing the initiatives that student government has started and how those have been so impactful to student life and student experience on campus. This is from 1993. It's the executive vice president of the student government, and they wrote a report talking about, there's 4 bullet points here. This is from October, so it's discussing things about Thanksgiving, food drives, homecoming, back when we had a football team. It also talks about the shuttle bus, which importantly student government started. This was a collaboration with contracted bus companies in the Boston area, where student government was able to negotiate contracts. They were able to negotiate payment and schedules. And so there's so many documents just discussing the communication between student government and these companies to get consistent bus routes along campus. As we know through the BU shuttle that we probably take often as students, depending where we live on campus, and even to just get to class, this is run by the university now. I think it's a great example of how student government initiatives can be successful and can be continued for decades. And this is just another example of collaboration where we weren't able to find documents, and we'd be really interested to know the conversations that happened to have that transition from student government to the university running it. But we think that it's a really great way to show that student government has these initiatives that impact students positively. And this, the second bullet point here talks about Thanksgiving Coalition food banks, and how the pies will feed those with HIV in the Alston-Brighton area. So I think that that's another initiative where we're just saying it's not programming for the students necessarily, but it's an initiative that student government can create an impact both on campus and the area that we are in. BU is part of a larger community. It's not just confined to Comm Ave, but we are part of the Boston community. And I think that giving back to the city is something that we've also seen a lot of through these documents, and has been particularly interesting to me to understand that we are so lucky to have this little strip along the Charles River, but there's so much else to the city of Boston that we need to give in return because we are here. So yeah, I thought this was a really interesting document.
I think that, I mean, I can say, look, yeah, I think it's interesting to see the extent to which student initiatives, well, their extent, kind of plainly speaking, like the shuttle bus is really fascinating. I mean, that's you think about how the shuttle buses run now, that's, they have a whole team, right? They have a whole Department of Transportation for this stuff. And that it was done by students who were by and large unpaid. So that's pretty interesting that they were able to do that. But, one might wonder, like, okay, people in the 80s and 90s were super into activism and they were doing a lot, but what about now, right? What are students doing now? Are they still interested in these things? Or what are they doing? Do they still have the same fire? And I think the answer is, by and large, yes. And so what we wanted to do is kind of bring the kind of spirit of the past into conversation with what's going on today. And so what we have here is a Senate bill that was proposed on March 30th and signed into law, so to speak, student government law, a few days later. And it concerns establishing undergraduates and graduate students onto the University Board of Trustees Academic Affairs and Student Life Committees. So previously, in the past, BU students have been non-voting committee members on Board of Trustee committees. So this includes things like alcohol awareness, student life, academic affairs. This concerns things like socially responsible investing. Students are no longer in those positions. And so really the kind of emphasis that we want to put on here is, you see in all of these documents that students have independently created their own sort of systems, which have been very beneficial to other students. They've also been in contact with administration and worked with administration to work on things like diversifying the faculty and the curriculum. They've been involved in crucial decision making, like socially responsible investing, right? Which in the case of apartheid, ended up happening. And so that sort of, this idea of student input has, it has diminished in some sense. And I think that the goal here is to say, how can we, look at the efficiency and, the great benefit that students were able to bring when they were sort of in these, more active and considerable decision-making positions, and how can we bring that back to kind of have students feel more satisfied with their voice on campus, and just, have our university go in the direction that students want, as well as administration, because at the end of the day, I think it's our position and many others that what the board wants, or what the administration wants, or what the student wants, is closer than it is far, if that makes any sense. So essentially what this does is it asks the administration to put a student back on these committees, and in fact it is in the Board of Trustees bylaws that there can be non-voting non-board voting members. So really this is kind of the cherry on top, and the call for more dialogue, more understanding between administration and student government, and more recognition that we all want what's for the best for the university. And so let's get in a conversation and see how we can get voices back where they were, and also begin productive conversation, so that the university can come to a better, more unified place as a whole, and really kind of all start to speak the same language.